The chapter we're going to discuss today is The Censors by Luisa Valenzuela. Luisa Valenzuela was born in Argentina to Pablo Francisco Valenzuela, a doctor, and the Luisa Mercedes Levinson, a prominent Argentine writer. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Buenos Aires. She began her career as a journalist. The short story The Censors was published in 1976 in a bilingual collection of fiction, The Censors. It is set in the backdrop of military coup in Argentina following the death of President Juan Perón. The new dictatorship of Jorge Videla, who reigned from 1976 to 1983, severely restricted constitutional liberties, killing people who opposed the junta and imposing strict censorship laws for its citizens. 13 to 15,000 citizens were killed in the Dirty War, as it was later called. In the story, Juan, a young man living in Argentina, writes a letter to the woman he loves, named Mariana, whose new address he has received, but he is worried that censors might find the contents of the letter objectionable and thus endanger Mariana beside himself. He comes up with an ingenious plan to intercept the letter by joining the Censors Secret Command Center, a bureaucratic agency that inspects the contents of each letter of bombs, poisonous powders, and secret encodings. He quickly learns the ropes at his new job and makes it to the upper levels through his devotion to his work. He finally gets his hands on the long-anticipated letter, which, being the perfect censor, he rejects and denounces. His superiors execute him the next day. The story is written in the form of satire against the authoritarian control of the people through censorship, which creates profound stresses in the mental states of the individuals. They become so fearful of the government machinery that they self-censor. He was caught off guard that day, and he couldn't realize that what he thought was a stroke of luck was really an acoustic trick of fate. Those things happen when you are not careful, and as sure as you are hearing me, one gets careless very, very often. Juancito let happiness and otherwise disturbing sentiment overwhelm him when, from a confidential source, he received Mariana's new address, now in Paris, and he knew that she hadn't forgotten him. Without thinking twice, he sat down at his desk and wrote a letter. The letter, the same one that now prevents him from concentrating on his work during the day and doesn't let him sleep when nights come. Juan knew there wouldn't be any problem with the text, that the text is irreproachable innocence. But the rest, he knows that they probe the letters, sniff them, feel them, read between the lines and their insignificant punctuation, even the accidental stains. He knows that the letter passed from hand to hand through the vast censorship bureaus, and that few finally pass the test and are able to continue their journey. Usually it's a question of months, years if complications arise. A long time in which the freedom and perhaps even the life of the sender and receivers are in suspense. And that's what has our Juan so deeply depressed, the idea that something could happen to Mariana in Paris through his fault. Mariana, of all people, who must feel so safe, so at ease there where she always dreamed of living. But he knows that the secret commanders of censorship operate the world over and granted a large discount on airline fares. Therefore, there is nothing to prevent them from going even to the darkest Paris courtyard, kidnap Mariana, and go home convinced of the nobility of their earthly mission. So you have to outsmart them. You have to do what everyone does. Try to sabotage the mechanism, throw sand in the gears, that is, go to the source of the problem in order to obstruct it. That was the plan when Juan, like so many others, That was the plan when Juan, like so many others, That was the plan when Juan, like so many others, applied to be a censor, not because of conviction like a few others or because he needed work like still others. No, he applied simply in order to try to intercept his own letter, not at all an original idea, but a confronting one. He was hired immediately because more censors are needed every day and there is no time to be squeamish about references. The Directorate of Censorship the Directorate of Censorship was aware of the secret. The Directorate of Censorship was aware of the secret. Directorate of Censorship was aware of the secret motive behind the desire of more than one to work in the bureau, but they were in no condition to be too strict, and anyway, what for? They knew how difficult it would be for those poor innocents to find the letter they were looking for, and even if they did, what importance does a letter or two that slips through the barrier's cracks compared to the others that new censors would shoot down? That's how our Juan was able to join the censorship bureau of the Ministry of Communication. The building seen from outside has a festive air because of the smoked glass that reflected the sky, an air that was in total contrast to the austere atmosphere of its interior. And little by little Juan became accustomed to the climate of concentration which his new work required, and knowledge that he was doing everything possible for his letter, that is, for Mariana, assuaged his anxieties. He wasn't even worried when the first month he was assigned to Section K, where the envelopes are opened with painstaking care to see if they contain some explosive. It is true that on the third day a letter blew a fellow worker's hand off and disfigured his face, but the bureau chief claimed it had been mere negligence on the victim's part, and Juan and other employees could continue working as before, although with much less assurance. At quitting time, another fellow worker tried to organize a strike to demand more pay for the hazardous work, but Juan didn't participate, and after thinking it over a while, he denounced him to the authorities in order to be promoted. Once doesn't form a habit, Juan thought as he left the chief's office, and when they transferred him to Section J, where they unfold the letters, infinite care to see if they contained poisonous powders, he felt that he had ascended a step and could therefore return to his healthy habit of not getting involved in external affairs. From J, thanks to his merits, he rose rapidly until reaching E, where the work became more interesting from the beginnings. The reading and analysis of the letters in that section, he could even cherish hopes of coming across his own missive written to Mariana, which, judging by the time elapsed, should have reached this level after a very long procession through the other departments. Little by little, there were days when his work so absorbed him that the noble mission that brought him to the bureau became momentarily blurred. Days of crossing out long paragraphs with red ink, of tossing many letters into the condemned basket. Days of horror at the subtle and scheming ways people found to transmit subversive messages. Days of intuition. So much zeal brought him rapid promotion. We don't know if it made him very happy. In Section B, the amount of letters which reached him daily was minimal. Very few cleared the previous hurdles. But as compensation, he had to read them often, put them under the magnifying glass, look for microdots with the electronic microscope, and so tune his sense of smell that upon returning home at night he was exhausted. He barely managed to heat up some soup, eat some fruit, and fall asleep with the satisfaction of having complied with his duty. Only his sainted mother worried about him. and tried without success to get him back onto the right path. She had said, although it wasn't necessarily true, Lola could say she is with the girls in the cafe, that they miss you, are expecting you. But Juan didn't want to have anything to do with non-essentials. Any distraction could cause him to lose the astuteness of his senses, and he needed them alert, sharp, attentive, tuned in order to be the perfect sensor and detect deceit. His was a true patriotic labor, self-denying and sublime. His basket of condemned letters soon became the best nourished but also the most subtle in the whole censorship bureau. He was at the point of feeling proud of himself. He was at the point of knowing that he had finally found his true path when his own letter to Mariana reached his hands. Naturally, he condemned it without remorse, and just as naturally, he couldn't prevent them from executing him at dawn. One more victim of his devotion to work.